Hello and welcome to this virtual phone bank training webinar. My name's Janet Grant and I'm a volunteer with the DeKalb Democratic Party. And we are really pleased that you're taking the time to complete this training, and more importantly, that you will volunteer with us to reach out to voters for this very important election that we have upcoming. Today, we are going to spend about a half an hour together to give you the basics of really both some information about the upcoming election and about the vote by mail option that we are encouraging voters to consider, and also some of the very specifics on how to actually use the phone banking system and walk you through what one of those calls will look like. And then we'll finish up at the end with some next steps and give you some resources and information should you have questions that I haven't been able to answer during our time together today. So first of all, this initiative is called our Voting DeKalb Initiative. And we are doing this in strong collaboration with the Democratic Party of Georgia. We did not want to duplicate efforts that they're already doing. We really wanted to have a nice synergy here, and so we are leveraging a lot of the information and resources that the Democratic Party has developed, and you'll see that later on. We'll be using a lot of the resources off of their website for you and to recommend to voters to make use of as well. So this initiative is really about calling our voters here in DeKalb County to inform them about options for voting in the upcoming elections. And now we are really pivoting and focusing on the November election. We'll talk about all of the elections that are upcoming, but obviously the general election on November the 3rd is the primary focus and opportunity to get out the vote. We are encouraging the safe vote by mail option and encouraging voters to apply for that as soon as possible. And we'll talk a little bit in more detail here in a minute about that. And ultimately, our goal is to get out the vote. DeKalb County has a huge number of folks that vote Democratic, and really DeKalb County can make a huge difference, not just in our local and state elections here in DeKalb County, but in the statewide elections. We have 2 Senate seats, we have a presidential election, and DeKalb County can make a huge dent in delivering Democratic votes for that election. So just to take a minute here, if we were live, we would spend a little bit of time talking through why you are interested in calling, and think about that for a minute. What motivates you to be involved in this initiative? I hope some of the same reasons that myself and others are involved in this phone banking initiative also apply to you. We really want to diversify the state's electorate. This is a state that has made a lot of progress in terms of being more of a purple state recently, and we are considered a battleground state for the upcoming election, which is unusual for Georgia and shows the progress. So we want to diversify the electorate as well, so that really all Georgians have representation that represents a broad array of interests in our state house and in our other elected officials. We really want to inform voters. There is a lot of confusion in the phone banking that we've already done this year for the June primary, and then again for the runoff in August. We're finding a lot of confused voters, especially with a lot of the rhetoric that's out there right now about vote by mail. We want voters to really understand what their options are and how to take advantage of those options. And then lastly, we want to create a connection between voters and the party. We want them to see the Democratic Party, the DeKalb Democratic Committee, and the Democratic Party of Georgia really as resources for them, and supporting them in understanding what their options are and how to affect their vote. We also are always looking for volunteers, and so this is another way for us to identify folks that really want to get involved at a higher level and engage them and get them involved in our activities up until November the 3rd. So those are some of the reasons that we're calling. The other thing I guess I should say as well is that given the pandemic and the inability to do our more standard canvassing activity, which is always the #1 most effective tool that we have in our toolbox, the next most effective tool is phone banking. So while folks like to write postcards or campaigns send out literature, etc., or even campaign ads on TV, none of those are as effective as phone banking, where we directly engage with a voter and have them understand their options and the resources that are available to them, and engage with somebody that is trying to help them exercise their right to vote. So that's really the #1 reason why we're doing this. So let's talk for a little bit about vote by mail and give you a little bit of an update. And some of this is probably going to be changing over time. And so we'll talk a little bit later in our time together about how we'll be communicating changes to all of our phone bank team as well. But as it stands right now, the Secretary, and I'm sure this will hold, the Secretary of State is not mailing out vote by mail applications for this election. He did mail them out for the June primary, but he has made it clear that he is not doing that for the November election, or doesn't plan to do that in the future for any other elections. The DeKalb County Board of Elections and the DeKalb County Commission is strongly considering mailing out applications. However, we still don't have a commitment from them as to the timing of that or the process for that to happen. So at this point, we're proceeding with really encouraging folks to access applications, and we'll talk in a second about how you do that, and proactively going through the process versus expecting to receive something in the mail. There are a number of resources for where to find applications. The application is available on the Secretary of State website. It's available on my voter page within the Secretary of State website. It's available on the Democratic Party of Georgia voting resource section of their website. And it's also available on the DeKalb County Board of Elections site. So any of those are places that you can refer voters. We are going to be referring voters, as you'll see later on in the discussion here, most significantly to the Democratic Party of Georgia voting website. And so that's probably where I would recommend referring voters, and I believe that's what we actually have in the phone script as well. Not only is the application form available there, but there's a very nice instruction sheet that is also available on the Democratic Party of Georgia website. Once somebody has an application, there is one section on that application that varies depending on whether you meet the criteria. So if someone is over the age of 65, disabled, or lives overseas, there's a checkbox that they can attest to on that website. And if they meet one of those criteria, they can automatically receive ballots then for all the elections in that particular election cycle. So that would include all of the upcoming elections up through what we anticipate being a runoff on January the 5th in 2021. However, if someone does not meet those criteria, they unfortunately have to request an absentee ballot for every single election that they would like to vote by mail. So at this point in time, we're recommending folks go ahead and fill out applications for all of the upcoming elections. The only thing that would vary is the date at the top for the date of the election that they are applying for, but go ahead and complete all those and send them all in at the same time. So vote by mail applications are submitted to the local Board of Elections, and in this case, the DeKalb Board of Elections on Memorial Drive. And they can be delivered in person, probably not a good idea in the middle of this pandemic. They can be mailed in, or what I'm recommending really is emailing them into the Board of Elections. And in the script that we have for you when you're talking with voters, we do have the email address in that script, and it is absenteeballot@DeKalbCountyGA.gov. So if someone would complete the application, they would either scan it or take a picture of the application and attach it to an email and send it into the Board of Elections. The Board of Elections is, at this point anyway, sending a confirmation email when they receive it. And then someone can track the status of that application on My Voter page. It will show when that it has been processed and when the ballot has been mailed out. Once someone receives their ballots and complete their ballots, they can return those, again, a variety of ways. They can return those by mail or in person to Memorial Drive, or actually they can return them to any of the early voting locations if it's during early voting time as well, or to a drop box. Drop boxes are available throughout DeKalb County. There are, I believe, 9 locations now. Those locations are cited on the DeKalb Board of Elections website, and we have a link for that later in this program under the resource section. So those drop boxes are, ballots are retrieved from those every 24 hours and up until 7 p.m. on election day. It's very important that somebody, if they are mailing their ballot in, that they do it in plenty of time, because not only does a ballot have to be postmarked by election day, it needs to be received actually by the Board of Elections. So it could take a few days to process through a mail department, for instance. So drop boxes are really a good option for folks to be able to send in or submit their ballots, but they have to be received by 7 p.m. on November the 3rd. And a ballot cannot be taken to a polling location on November the 3rd. It has to either go directly to the Board of Elections or to a drop box to be counted. So in-person early voting will be again in place for the November election. The dates are October the 12th, which is a Monday, through October the 30th. And I believe it's October the 24th that will be a Saturday voting. So specific locations and times will be posted soon on the DeKalb County Board of Elections website, and we will be communicating that to all the phone bankers as soon as that's available. So those are kind of the updates related to vote by mail. This has become obviously a very kind of politicized issue, and it really shouldn't be. This is a safe option for our voters. But it's really important to do it as soon as possible because of the anticipated volumes, so that our Board of Elections can be sure to process the applications and get the ballots out timely, so that folks can actually get their ballot cast through this option. So let's pivot now and talk about the actual process for phone banking. So the system that we are using for phone banking is a system that's called VAN. And for those of you that have done canvassing before, you might be familiar with the little app that we use for canvassing called Minivan. And these are kind of sister programs to each other. And the ID, the action ID, is the same for either system. So if you have canvassed before or you have phone banked before, it likely has been in the VAN system and you may already have an action ID. So if you do have an action ID, when you get to this screen, and I'll back up here in a second and explain how you get to this screen, but when you get to this screen, you would just put in your email and your action ID and it will bring you into the VAN system. The way that we have been operating phone banking is you sign up for your phone bank shifts through Mobilize, similar to how you signed up for this training. And the evening before, usually the evening before, I will send you a specific email with details for that phone bank shift. It will have a link in it, like the example that you see on the screen here, that has the specific phone bank code for the phone bank list that we are using for calling on that specific day. If you sign up for a shift from, say, 10 to noon, you'll get that phone bank code. Usually we have that same phone bank code available all day long. So if you decide that you want to get back on and try making some calls later in the day, you can use that same phone bank code. So again, you're going to put in your email address and action ID if you already have one. If you believe you had one, but you don't remember your password, there is the function here, forgot your password, and they'll email you a link to be able to get in and establish a new password. If, however, you have not done anything with van or minivan in the past and don't have an action ID, it's very simple to then create an account. So on that original screen, there's a button for create an account, and this screen will come up, and it's very simple to then establish an action ID. So it's your email, you select a password, put in your name, your phone number, and then hit create an account. There is some security involved with that, but it's a very simple process. And then remember that that password going forward, because again, you'll be able to use that for all of your phone banking activity with us or with others that use VAN. And hopefully we'll be back out canvassing at some point in the future, and you'll be able to use it for that as well. So I'm going to really skip over this, because if you go through the process that we just talked about and you get your ID in, it should then take you directly into the very first phone bank screen. If you don't have a link like we send you, then there's a process to go through and come into VAN through a browser page, but we're going to skip that for now. So, so this is what you're going to see then. Once you've gotten into the system, you're going to see the very first voter that is on the list for you to call. So you will have a name, and I've just blanked that out here, a name and a phone number, and that's the phone number you're going to call. You'll see the age and whether it's male or female. And over on the left-hand side, you'll learn a little bit about the person in terms of their polling location, even where there's the closest early vote location, the precinct code, and again, their preferred phone number. So go ahead and kind of get familiar with that before you dial the phone. And then when you dial the phone, sometimes someone will answer and many times someone will not. So let's just walk through, first of all, if you aren't able to reach a person. And let me tell you a little bit about the statistics here. So as you can imagine, probably from how you answer phones on your own calls on your own phone, if someone sees a phone call coming in that they don't recognize, lots of times they do not answer. And that's just the reality of what happens when we're phone banking. So we have been running about a 15% reach rate. So about 15% of the time, someone does pick up the phone and you're able to engage in a conversation. The rest of the time, the majority of those calls end up with a voicemail. So voicemail is definitely still of value. We're going to go ahead and we'll talk in a second here about the voicemail that we're going to leave. There's still value in that. And there is huge value as we continue to reach out to additional voters through this system to also identify things like disconnected numbers or changed numbers or things like that. So don't think that only if you reach a voter that 15% of the time that there's value here. If you are not able to reach somebody and their voicemail comes on, the very first top of the phone script, as you can see here on the screen, is a suggested voicemail. And it's a fairly simple one, but it is one that we're hoping to impart some valuable information for that voter. So go ahead and identify yourself and your role as a volunteer with the DeKalb Dems and why we're calling. A focus again on absentee ballots and informing them that application forms and instructions are available on the Democratic Party website. If you haven't already, I would suggest checking out the Democratic Party website so you have a good feel for how it looks and how it works. There are several places on the very front page of that website where it says vote. And any one of those, you click that and it takes you to a page that has all the voter resources. And then finally, you're going to close that voicemail by leaving the voter protection hotline phone number. And this is a very valuable resource that the Democratic Party of Georgia has developed with hundreds of volunteers that are manning this really 24/7 with a whole team of attorneys that are supporting those volunteers. So that is a great resource, and we're going to recommend giving that to voters really throughout this process. But in particular, on a voicemail, go ahead and leave that that hotline. So you're not giving your own number, you're giving the hotline number in your message. So in terms of recording then that you were not able to reach the voter, again, right at the top of the screen, there is a drop-down box where it says, I couldn't reach whoever the voter's name is, and it gives you a number of options. So you can see here, not at home, refused, deceased, moved, called back, busy, left message, wrong number, and disconnected. So what we just talked about, leaving a voicemail, go ahead and we mark that as left message. If any of these others apply, then go ahead and check that. So if it just rings and rings and rings and you don't get a voicemail or any answer, I would count that as not home. If someone briefly comes on and hangs up, I would call that refused. If you learn in talking with whoever does answer the phone that the voter that you're calling is deceased, go ahead and record that, or that they have moved. Sometimes someone will say, can you call back later? So mark that so that we can put that voter back in the queue for a future call, etc. And very important to identify if it's a wrong number or a disconnected number so that we clean up our database as well. So now what we're hoping is that you will be able to directly connect with a voter and engage them. And the next part of the script that you'll see on the computer screen and is displayed here is the script that we are using. And this is a script that's really focused on vote by mail and encouraging folks for that, as well as informing them of their options, other options for voting. So again, you're going to introduce yourself and that you're a volunteer. And really at the very beginning, we want you to try and establish a little bit of rapport with the person, asking them how they are, anything that you can do to just engage them right up front in the conversation. So inform them then about the reason that you're calling, in particular around vote by mail, and asking them if they are interested in applying for vote by mail. So there are a couple of places through this script where there's going to be a drop-down box of a yes or no answer. And this is one of them. We want to understand how many people are interested in vote by mail. So you will select yes or no. And if it's yes, then you have in your script the suggested information to relay about the upcoming elections, encouraging them to go ahead and vote by mail, to complete the applications now for all of the upcoming elections, which, by the way, the elections that we have detailed in the script and are on the docket here in DeKalb County for the rest of this cycle includes a special election on September 29th for those that live in the 5th Congressional District. So that is not all of DeKalb County. It is just the area that John Lewis represented. And so there's a special election for that. Then, of course, the November 3rd general election, which is our primary focus. And then we will have likely have runoffs on December the 1st for state and local offices, and on January the 5th for federal offices. We anticipate that for that second Senate seat. So you're going to direct them then to how to download an application off of the Democratic Party of Georgia website and access the application instructions as well. So the rest of the script, and we don't have it all here on the screen, the rest of the script then also takes the voter through information about the other voting options, about early voting, which, as we said earlier, is October the 12th through October the 30th for the November election, and also information about Election Day. Given that, we're still in a pandemic and there are continued changes related to polling locations, we're always recommending that folks double check their polling location prior to going on November the 3rd, and they can do that on my voter page through the Secretary of State's website. The next question that we are asking voters and ask you to complete yes or no here is really around support for voting for Democratic candidates. And as I said earlier, DeKalb County is a very solidly Democratic county. And we've got the little statement in here in the script. DeKalb County has enough registered Democrats to flip Georgia blue, and if Georgia goes blue, the US does too. So that's a little tagline that we're using. So we want to encourage folks that it makes a big difference here, and that DeKalb County can make a big difference in the overall Georgia election results, in particular for those statewide and the presidential office. So we're asking for their support for Democrats in the upcoming election, and again, choose yes or no. If they're saying no, then I would, politely really end the call at that point. If they say yes, and then especially if it's an enthusiastic yes, then go on and ask the next question related to volunteers. So we're looking for folks to be phone banking, to be doing other kinds of activities in support of the upcoming election. So if someone is interested in volunteering, please, again, choose the option of yes here. And at that point, if they are interested, be sure to get any preferred contact information from them, including their email address. And there is a section at the bottom of the script where it's a notes section, a free form note section that you can record that information in, so that we'll have that when we pull on the back end a list of those that are interested. And then we also have one last question here, and that is if the person is interested in learning more about being a poll worker or a poll monitor. And we are sharing that information with the Democratic Party of Georgia, the voter protection team, for them to follow up and engage folks that are interested in those kinds of roles. So that's really the call that you are going to be making for each of the voters that are on the list for the day that you're calling. At the very bottom of the script, there are a number of resources, and many of those resources are also going to be in the email that I send to you prior to your phone bank shift, so that you have ready access to those resources for yourself and for the voters. So finally, I would say that for every voter that really has questions or feels that they need potentially more information, I would freely hand out that voter protection hotline number, the 888-730-5816 number, and encourage voters to use that, that resource if they have any further questions. Then at the very bottom, you'll see here that there are a couple of options. In most cases, you're going to go ahead and save what you've recorded for this call and go on to the next call. So you'll hit that blue button. And if you are at the end of your shift, then the way that you stop there is just say stop making calls, and then you can log out of the VAN system. So just want to reiterate again the importance of documenting your call findings. So there are just a few things, as you saw through the script, a few questions where you're logging yes or no, or the reason that you weren't able to reach somebody. But it's really important to have that information so that that we know that that voter has already been engaged, we know the answers to those questions. And we can move on to reaching other voters with future callers. So just a couple of scenarios here, and we've already talked through most of these. Again, strongly encourage you to leave a voicemail if you receive a voicemail from a voter, and make that voicemail purposeful by informing them about the option to get applications off the Democratic website and to access the voter protection hotline, and giving that phone number. Again, if there's a disconnected or wrong number, really important to go ahead and log that so that we can clean up the database related to that particular voter. If a parent or another family member answers, it's important to, again, you can record that as just that they were not at home. But if you learn through that the person has moved or no longer is at that address, then record that. For instance, I had a call the other day where a mother answered, and her son is now away at college in Massachusetts and has registered to vote there. So in that case, I logged him as having moved. If you find a hesitant voter, again, just tactfully handle whatever that particular issue is. If you find somebody that is not receptive to the conversation, then just politely end the conversation and move on. If someone does want to call back, again, just go ahead and log that in the system so that they will be back in for a future phone banker to reach out to. So again, here is the voter protection hotline number. This is something that you should have handy with you whenever you're phone banking, so that you can be sure to refer voters to this important resource. So, there is a tendency for some voters when we reach them to want to engage in a longer dialogue. And while we definitely want to engage them and have this be a really purposeful call for them, this is not the call to get into a long political discussion. So try to stay to the script that we've provided, and just simply apologize for not having more time, that we're trying to reach as many voters as we can, and try to return the script. So that is really the information related to VAN and the process of actually phone banking. I want to go through a few resources here with you before we finish up and get you on your way. So the way that we have developed to really communicate among the phone bankers as well as other volunteers for DeKalb Dems is through a system or an app called Slack. And when I first heard about this, I thought, oh no, not yet another app. But it really is a very slick system that allows us to kind of chat in various channels, as they call it, about various topics, and is a really efficient way for us to be able to get information out to everybody about changes that are happening or new information, you know, polling site changes, different information about, you know, how vote by mail is being handled, etc. So I strongly encourage you to go ahead and sign up for Slack. This link that is here on the slide and will be in the email verification that you received about this training session is where you just link to that, and you can then add Slack. You can use either an app or you can use it just on your desktop as well. So strongly encourage you to sign up and be part of our community, really, for phone banking. So this brings us really to the end of the training. So what I would encourage you to do is to really, you know, review the information that we have reviewed today. This slide deck will be posted on Slack, so you can access it there and be able to refresh your memory of any of the information that we have reviewed. You can also ask questions on Slack. Most of us are monitoring Slack all the time, and so if you've got a question that came out of this discussion today, feel free to post that on Slack or reach out to me directly, and I'll give you my email address here in a future slide. Then it's really time to sign up. And the purpose of really going through this training is to really prepare you to be ready to phone bank. And there's no better way to get going than to just get going and start making those calls and really contributing and making a difference to supporting voters for this very important election on November the 3rd. So our volunteer shifts are on Mobilize. We have 3 a day from now all the way up until November the 2nd. And we really need an army of phone bankers in order to reach as many voters as possible during that time across DeKalb County and encourage a very high turnout. So at that point then you can sign up and then you start calling. As I said, once you register for a shift, the night before your shift, you'll receive a detailed email from me with your phone bank code and kind of reiterating all of the resources that we have talked about. But feel free to also reach out to me directly if there's questions along the way. Here are a few of the resources that we talked about today, and I usually always put these in that email that comes with your phone bank code. So get familiar with what's on the Georgia Dem website. Lots of resources there, including where folks can send their applications back to, Dropbox locations, the actual application for vote by mail, instructions for vote by mail, lots of resources there. The Dropbox locations are also available on the DeKalb Board of Elections site. My voter page is a really important page that all voters should get familiar with. You can just Google it and you put in your first initial, your last name, your date of birth, and the county you live in, and it takes you to a customized page with all of your voter information, including where you vote. That's where you can track your absentee ballot status, etc. And again, reiterating the hotline and joining us on Slack. So with that, you are prepared to venture into phone banking. We really appreciate your interest and engagement in this. As I said earlier, this is going to take an army, but this is the most important election I know of my lifetime, and I would guess of probably of all of yours. And so the next, weeks and days and weeks up until November the 3rd, there's nothing more important than we can do than to engage and support other voters to get out the vote for November the 3rd. So please reach out to me by email if you have any questions also coming out of this training. And with that, we'll hope that you can sign up for shifts and start contributing. Thank you.